What is going on, guys? It's Modded Warfare here and welcome back to another PS4 tutorial. So in this tutorial I'm going to be showing you guys how to get Ubuntu, a Linux operating system, running on your PS4 on 1.76 using the WebKit Exploit. If you don't know anything about the WebKit Exploit, I have a tutorial for that, a full setup tutorial on how to get the WebKit Exploit working. So I'll put a link in the top right hand corner of the screen that you can click on to access that video. That'll also be linked in the description as well, along with all the software you'll need for this video. In order to boot Linux onto your PS4, you need to go ahead and boot it using a USB stick. And unlike when you would normally say mount a ISO to a USB, this is different. You can't just mount the Ubuntu ISO to the USB stick. It doesn't work like that. It won't boot like that. You need to actually install it, do a full installation of Ubuntu onto the USB stick, and then just boot up that installation from the USB stick once you're on the PS4. So that means you need some kind of virtual machine software would be the best thing to use, something like VirtualBox, which will be linked in the description. Another thing is that most of the other tutorials on this use two USB sticks. You need one USB stick for the bootloader to actually boot, which actually has the Linux loader on it. So you need to boot into that USB stick first to boot up the Linux loader, and then once that's loaded into RAM, you can unplug that USB stick, plug in the one with Ubuntu on it, and then the Linux loader will boot Ubuntu from that other USB stick. Well, I found a way that works with one USB stick. So in this tutorial, we just need one USB stick. You don't need two. You're only going to need one for this tutorial. But I recommend a USB stick above 8 gigabytes, maybe like a 16 gig USB stick, or I'm using a 65 gigabyte USB stick for this. But at very minimum, you can get it to work with just an 8 gigabyte USB, but I wouldn't recommend anything below 8 gigabytes because Ubuntu requires 6.3 gigabytes of space for it to install. Okay, so first of all, what you want to do is go ahead and download Ubuntu. I'll put a link to this exact version in the description because this version 14.04 seems to be the most stable and seems to work the best. For me anyway, I've had the best results with 14.04, but where I have tried other versions of Ubuntu and have had quite a few problems with various different things, like it just not booting up for some reason. Whereas 14.4 seems to be pretty stable, and you need to make sure you're using the AMD 64 version, but like I say, I'll link this exact version in the description. You can try other versions if you just head onto Ubuntu's website and maybe try some newer versions of Ubuntu, but make sure that you are downloading the AMD 64 version of whatever type or whatever version of Ubuntu you're downloading. The other thing you're going to need is this bootlinux.zip, which again will be linked in the description. Just go ahead and download that. And you're also going to need VirtualBox. So again, I'll link that in the description as well. So go ahead and install VirtualBox. And once you've got VirtualBox installed, you want to click on New to create a new virtual machine. And I'm just going to call this PS4 because I've already labeled one as Ubuntu somewhere. So I'm going to change the type to Linux and make sure the version is Ubuntu 64-bit, not 32-bit. And then go ahead and click Next. Set the amount of RAM that you want for the virtual machine. So I'm going to go 8 gigabytes of RAM. Really doesn't matter too much. I mean, you could go with probably about 2 gigabytes minimum. But I've got 16 gigs of RAM in my computer, so 8 gigabytes is half of that, which is plenty of storage space. And then when it asks you to create a virtual hard disk, make sure you say no, do not add a virtual hard disk, because we want to install everything onto the USB stick, not a virtual drive. So then click create, and it will just give you a warning. Just click continue, and it will create the virtual machine. Then what you want to do is click on settings and head down to storage. And in storage, click on this little empty with the little disk symbol. And then on this little disk symbol here, you want to click that to choose a virtual drive, and then click the button to choose virtual optical disk file. Then you want to browse for your Ubuntu ISO file and select it, and then click open. And then what you want to do is head down to the USB tab and add your USB stick in here. So click the little plus symbol and then add your USB. It'll link a bunch of USB devices that are in here. So it's got stuff like my headset, my mouse and keyboard are in here. So just make sure you select your USB stick. This is my SanDisk USB stick. So I'm going to add that and click OK. And then what you want to do is click Start. And if you added your USB stick correctly, you should hear the little Windows sound of the USB stick being unplugged when it hasn't actually been unplugged from the system. And you're going to get the Ubuntu installer. So just give this maybe about a minute or so to boot up. Okay, so that once it boots, it should give you the little installer. And what you want to do is make sure you click install Ubuntu rather than try Ubuntu. You want to click install. Click install and then click, you can download the updates while installing. I'm not going to do that just for quickness because this does take quite a long time to install. So I'm not going to add extra time by adding the downloads and updates. So I'm just going to click continue. Okay, and then you'll get a bunch of options here for the installation type. You do not want to erase disk and install Ubuntu. You want to click something else and then click continue. Okay, and once you get to this screen, this will basically give you the option to start creating partitions and format your USB stick. So if you don't see this little free space option, then just click the top option here and click create a new partition table. If you click that, it will give you the little free space option, which will give you how much free space is on your USB stick. If I haven't said this already, this will wipe all the stuff off your USB stick. So make sure you are working with a blank USB stick or you've backed up all the information that was on your USB stick beforehand. So with this free space, what you want to do is click the plus icon. Now, this is where we differ a little bit from the other tutorials on this where you're using 2 USB sticks. In this tutorial, we're only using 1 USB stick. So what we need to do is we need to leave a small chunk of space, create a small partition, which is going to be for the Linux loader. And then the rest of the space on the USB stick is going to be for Ubuntu. So I'm going to leave maybe, let's see, how big is this, are these files on here? So we can get an idea of how big we need to make our partition. So if we go to properties, it's only 7 megabytes, well, 8 megabytes roughly. So what we'll do is we'll just create a very small partition, maybe 20 megabytes or something, really small partition. Make sure it's a primary partition, beginning of this space, and then you want to select the use as, and you want to select FAT32 file system. Must be FAT32 file system for this one. And then for the mount point, you want to set it as /Windows and click OK. And then that should create that one, FAT32 /Windows, a little 18 megabyte partition, which will be enough for the bootloader files that we need for the PS4. And then the rest of the space, we're going to make free space for the Ubuntu installation. So we're going to click plus again, and this time we just leave the size as default, which will be the rest of the space on the USB stick. We want to set this as a primary partition. Beginning of this space, we want to select it as ext2 file system. And then for the mount point, we just want to do a / and click OK. And that'll create that. And now we've got our 2 partitions. This one is for the bootloader, and then this one is for the Ubuntu installation. So with the 2 USB stick method, you just have one USB stick, the whole USB stick for Ubuntu, and then another whole USB stick for the bootloader. Whereas what we've done is we've partitioned the drive into 2 sections, one for the bootloader and one for the Ubuntu installation. So once you've done that, you just click install now, click continue, and it'll give you a couple of warnings. Review changes listed will be written to the disk. So just click continue and it will start installing. Oh, we have to go through time zones. So select your time zone, your keyboard layout, enter a username, and go ahead and enter a password. And make sure you select login automatically so that it won't ask you for the password when it boots up on PS4. And then click continue. And now you just have to wait for it to install. This can take quite a long time to install, especially on a virtual machine. So just wait for it to finish installing, and I'll be back with you guys once it's finished. Okay, and once it's finished installing, that will just give you an option to restart. You just click the button to restart and it will start trying to shut down. For some reason, oh no, it did shut down. What it does though is it restarts and it tries to boot back up, but unfortunately VirtualBox is not able to actually boot from a USB stick, so it's just going to give you this could not read from boot medium. So all you have to do once it reaches that point is just go to File and Close, and then power off the machine, and that will quit you out of VirtualBox. Now what you should get is this autoplay message popping up here that's detected the little partition we made on the USB stick. So it should only show up as whatever you partitioned it as. Remember, we only partitioned about a 20 megabyte partition and 17.7 megabytes free. That's all we should have. We will not see the Ubuntu partition because it's formatted in EX2 or EXT2, which Windows cannot use. So Windows will not detect that. So what we need to do now is just open up our bootlinux.zip and extract our 2 files here onto our little partition we made on the USB stick. These are the files that will actually allow us to boot Linux. So it's a little Linux bootloader, and once we get onto the Linux bootloader, we can then boot into Ubuntu from the bootloader. So you just copy those 2 files on there, unplug your USB stick, and plug it into your PS4 and turn your PS4 on. You also are going to need a USB mouse and keyboard for this as well. So one thing you could get that would definitely help is if you got some kind of USB hub, something like one of these things, where you can plug this into your PS4 and then you get a bunch of extra USB ports that you can plug in. Because if you think about it, we only have access to one USB port, because one of the USB ports in the PS4 is going to be taken up with our USB stick, which has Linux on it, and then the other USB port is going to be taken up by either a mouse or a keyboard. So there's not enough USB ports to have a mouse and keyboard both connected at the same time, which is obviously a big problem. So if you got one of these kind of like USB splitters, then it would be fine, because you could have a bunch of USB devices all connected up at the same time. There is kind of a way around this. I mean, you just plug in a USB mouse and then use the on-screen keyboard on Ubuntu in order to have keyboard input. And then another thing you can also do is if you have like a spare laptop hard drive lying around that you don't use, then you could install Ubuntu on the laptop hard drive and then take the PS4's hard drive out, put the laptop hard drive in, and have the little Linux bootloader on a USB stick, and then go ahead and turn the PS4 on, boot into Linux, the bootloader, and then from the bootloader you can boot Ubuntu from the hard drive, from the little laptop hard drive that you put in there, and then you would have both USB ports free, for one for the mouse and one for the keyboard, and then you could have both hooked up that way. But unfortunately, I haven't got one of these little USB hubs yet, so I'm just going to be having to swap between the USB mouse and USB keyboard, which isn't going to be very convenient. So anyway, let's go ahead and transition over to the PS4, and I'll show you guys what to do from there. Okay, so once you're on the PS4, guys, what you want to do is obviously head to the settings and head to User's Guide, which will take you to the PS4 Start site. If it doesn't take you to the PS4 Start site, then go ahead and check our WebKit Exploit guide, which shows you how to get the user guide to redirect you to the exploit page that we have here, which will take you here, and then you can go to the WebKit Playground, which is the actual exploit page from which we can run Linux. So yeah, go ahead and click that link, watch that video if you don't already have the WebKit Playground installed. So what you want to do is make sure you've got the USB stick plugged in to your PS4, one of the USB ports on the PS4, and then click the load option to load Linux. So this will go black for a while because you'll lose signal to your TV or your screen for a little while. And then you should get the little penguins. There they are. Okay, so when you get to this stage, what you can try and do is unplug the USB stick and plug it back in to see if it'll automatically boot Linux. I doubt it will though. We'll see. I unplugged it, plugged it back in. We'll probably just get we just get the little option to type something in. If we were using the 2 USB stick method, then that would have worked. You unplug the bootloader USB and then plug in the Ubuntu USB, and it'll automatically boot into Ubuntu. It didn't do that for us because it's trying to boot from the Windows partition, because that's the primary partition, so it's trying to boot from the Windows partition, but we need it to boot from the Linux partition that has Ubuntu on. So what you want to do at this point is plug in a USB keyboard. So I'm going to plug in my USB keyboard, and I should be able to start typing. There we go. So what we want to type is we want to type in fdisk -L, and what that's going to do is basically display all the partitions that are on our USB. So let's see. Okay, so what we have here is we've got SDB1, which is Windows 95 FAT32, which is what it was trying to boot from. And then we've got, oh no, actually, primary partition is Linux. I don't know why it didn't boot from Linux then. It should have, but it didn't for some reason. So you can see it's got dev/SDB1, which is a Windows 95 partition, and it's got dev/SDB2, which is the Linux partition. It says Linux, so that is the one we want to boot from. So what you need to do is mount it first. So to mount it, you type in mount space /dev/SDB2. In this case, of course, yours might be different. So you might be SDC1 or SDC2 or SDA1, SDA2. So just check to see what yours is. And then once we've done that, we can do space new root, which is one word, and then /. Okay, and then all you want to do is press enter, and that should mount it. And then what you want to do is you want to type in exec for execute, space switch root, switch_root, /new root, / and then do a space, another / new root, /sbin, /init. So that is what you want to do right there, and I will put that in the description so that you know exactly what to type in if that was a bit confusing. So it'll be in the description as well. Press enter, and it may not work the first time. Looks like it is going to work the first time. Yeah, it worked the first time there. If it doesn't work the first time, just press the up arrow key on your keyboard, and that'll put the command back in. Press enter a second time and just do it a couple of times until you get it. It will then say the disk drive for Windows is not ready yet or is not present. Continue or wait. Press S to skip mounting or M for manual recovery. Just press the S key on your keyboard and that will ignore the Windows partition because you can't boot from the Windows partition anyway. So just press S and you should be fine, and it'll start booting. Still on a blank screen right now, not sure what's happening. Oh, there we go. So Ubuntu is now booting. We've got the screen up there. Okay, there we go. We've got Ubuntu. Okay, so I've gone ahead and plugged in my USB mouse now. So I've got mouse control. And I'm just going to head up to the search function and switch back to the keyboard, which means I have to unplug and plug back in. This is why a USB hub would be really useful. I'm just going to type in onboard, and that will give us the onboard keyboard so that I won't have to keep disconnecting the mouse. So now I've got the onboard keyboard, so I'll plug the mouse back in and I'll just use the onboard keyboard to type instead of having to unplug and plug back in my keyboard all the time. Because I'm connected through a wired connection, I've got my console Ethernet cable connected to my PC, and my PC is wirelessly connected to my router, and I'm using a connection sharing on my computer to share the wireless connection to the console through an Ethernet cable. I will be able to get internet connectivity. However, if you were, for example, on if you're just trying to use the built-in Wi-Fi on the PS4, it will not work because there are no current drivers. So hopefully sometime soon they'll come up with drivers for Ubuntu for the PS4 and other Linux operating systems, because it would be really useful, especially if we could get graphics drivers installed, because right now there's no graphics drivers, so you can't really take advantage of the PS4's power to actually play PC games on Steam, because that would be great. You could install PC games on Steam and basically have like a little gaming PC out of your PS4, but we need graphics drivers for that, which we currently don't have. So right now you cannot really game. Even Ubuntu itself just is running incredibly slow because we don't have any drivers for anything right now, which is pretty unfortunate. But just to show you that the internet's working, if I do a little search for our good old Apparition Net, let's have a look. Apparition Net and search. There we go. You can see that the internet is working perfectly fine right there, but you'll also notice how slow it's going because of the no graphics drivers right now, but that is working. Okay, so that is that, and also another cool thing you can do if we just have a look at the if we look for terminal, open up the terminal, and in the terminal, so in here you're going to type in lspci, and that will give us a bunch of information on the hardware that's in here. So you can see that you've got all the Sony Corporation devices that are connected here, and then you've got a bunch of AMD devices because obviously the CPU and the GPU is all AMD. So you're going to see AMD and Sony Corporation here. That's just kind of to prove that it is running on the PS4, in case there's anyone who doubts that it's actually running on the PS4. It is indeed running on the PS4 right there. So there you go, guys. That is that is Ubuntu running on a PS4, which is pretty cool. Again, it's not very practical, it's not very useful. You could set it up as like a server or something to just run in the background. There's not many uses for it because it's very slow and laggy. Hopefully some smart people will make drivers available for it so that you can actually get the Wi-Fi working, and if people can actually get the graphics drivers working, then that would be great. If we could actually have Linux take advantage of the power of the PS4's graphics chip, then we could be pretty much running it as a little gaming PC if we install Steam on there, and you could start playing a bunch of Steam games on your PS4 through Linux, which would be pretty awesome. Unfortunately, it's not there yet. You can install Steam, obviously, and you can play, like, you know, maybe 2D games, or, you know, not very graphically intensive games would probably run pretty badly, but still run on Linux on the PS4. But hopefully one day graphics chip drivers will happen and we'll actually be able to fully take advantage of it, which would be awesome. But right now it's just a little cool thing that you can do that I want to share on my channel, especially since all the other tutorials I've seen on this require 2 USB sticks, whereas we've been able to do it with just one. So yeah, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video or you found the information useful, go ahead and leave it a like. I really do appreciate that. Subscribe if you haven't subscribed already, and comment if you have any questions, and I'll see you guys in the next video.